Hi guys, my name is Ellen and today I'm going to be playing with the brand new eyeshadow palette from Melt Cosmetics, and this is their Mary Jane palette. So this is a 10 pan eyeshadow palette, which is generally the size that their eyeshadow palettes are. I personally got mine at Sephora and it retails for $58, but I did buy it during the VIB sale, so I was able to get 20% off. Okay, so when you open it up, I'm pretty sure the outer packaging on it, yeah, it's different than their other eyeshadow palettes. So I have my other Melt palettes here and all of them are the same kind of size and length, but this Mary Jane palette has this raised lettering on it. I think you can probably see that it's raised on there, and it has these little glitters in it that are actually like loose glitters inside of it. Obviously you're not gonna be able to see that, but in person the glitters are loose in there, so you can kind of like move them around and they jiggle in there, which is kind of cool. When you open it up, it is, I think, the same layout as their other eyeshadow palettes. You have this little plastic insert, but you do have a mirror in there, and then you get those longer like rectangular type of pans, and all the shade names are underneath. So I'm pretty sure in terms of their actual eyeshadow palettes, this is the most cool toned one that they have come out with. I know that they had a really cool toned eyeshadow stack, but I think they're kind of phasing their eyeshadow stacks out, which I think is sad. I thought those were so cool, but yeah, I haven't really seen them on Sephora's website anymore, and a lot of the ones I have seen are on sale, so I think they're really phasing the stacks out to just replace them with their actual palettes. So my face is obviously already done and my eyes are primed and everything, so I can jump right into doing the eyeshadow. Okay, I'm gonna start off with this shade right here called Mari on my Surratt eyeshadow brush. I forget what this is called, but this shade just seems to be like a, I don't know, a cooler taupe shade, kind of a little bit lighter than the other shades. So I'll just start with that since I don't really know what kind of look exactly I want to do. I'll just kind of, I don't know, throw that in the crease and add a little depth in there. That shade is really, really pretty. It just adds, at least on my skin tone, just the lightest amount of definition to the eye socket. It makes my eye socket look just a little bit deeper, but in a very, very minimal way. It's a really pretty shade. And at least on me, it's not so cool toned where it pulls super gray once you get it blended out. You still get to see that little bit of taupe in there. So it says this eyeshadow palette was inspired by the dense tones found inside of the Bisque smoke. Okay, so next I'm going to go in with the shade right here called Gasper, and that one has, it's a little bit deeper than the other shade I used, and it has a little bit more of a greenish yellow undertone to it. I think I might just do kind of like a halo eye and add some depth on the inner and outer corners of my eye and do one of those more metallic shades in the middle. So what else to say? It's supposed to elevate your classic smoky eye with gunmetal and hazy crystalline hues. Apply metallic shades wet to intensify their luster. Oh, okay. So it says specifically to kind of foil the metallic shades if you want that extra pop of metallicness. So I'm just kind of dipping back into that Gasper shade back and forth and just adding more depth. I haven't changed shades yet. Okay, sorry, I had to change my battery, but as I was saying, I'm basically just taking a really small amount of that same Gasper color. I haven't changed that yet, and I'm just really lightly starting to take that a bit higher than my actual socket. Since my eyes are kind of hooded, I'm going to fake where my actual crease is a little bit and take that a bit higher up. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the inner corner of my eye. I'm going to blend that a little bit up on the inner corner too. And then I'm going to take my original brush again and go back into that first Mari shade. And I am going to just kind of blend the edges of that out. Okay, I'm just going to take this Gasper shade a little bit more and just take that a little bit higher on the outer edge of my eye. I feel like it's not high enough. I think that's one thing when you do have hooded eyes, is kind of finding how high up you really can go to fake your crease and to fake lid space without making it go, I don't know, so high that it just becomes muddy and kind of messy looking. Because I feel like you can really get high up there close to the brow bone but there is kind of like a point of no return where once you get a little bit too high and you start blending it out and it just blends out a little too much, it just makes you look like you have a black eye. But I don't know, it's a bit hard with hooded eyes, you know? You can't really see what all the work that you put into it. Okay, so I'm going to take a little bit of the shade here. It's the deepest shade in the palette. And I'm going to take this on a much smaller, denser little brush. And this one I'm going to make sure not to put very high at all. I'm just going to try and leave this right on my actual lid. And when I blend it out, I can blend it up a little bit, but I don't want that dark color to go too high up. And that shade almost looks like a black once you actually get it on the eye, but more of like a smoky kind of charcoal black. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that there for now and then maybe just really lightly blend it out a little bit at my crease, but I'm not going to worry about that one too much because I can add more depth later. So I wonder what shade I want to actually add to the center of my eye. Ooh, this is a difficult one. Maybe I'll try and use two different shades. I'll take one of the lighter shades on the end, like right in the center, and then I'll do one that's a little bit deeper, kind of all over in the center of my eye. Ooh, I don't know. So I think I want to take this shade Bomba initially in the center of my eye. It looks quite similar to this Santa Maria shade, but this one almost seems to be slightly more cool toned, and then this one pulls a little bit more greenish gold. I think that one will look really interesting. So I think what I'm going to do is wet my brush like they say to do to really kind of foil it out. I really loaded that up onto my brush and then I'm just going to spray that. I feel like the reflex in this one are like silver and blue almost. I don't know if I'm seeing that wrong, but yeah, that is such a pretty gunmetal shade. So I think I'm just going to take this particular shade just right to there, and then maybe I'll go in with a slightly lighter metallic up there just so it's not super dark, like right at the top of my eye. I just got a teeny weeny bit of fallout, but I think that was more my fault. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. I basically just blended all of that black fallout into my nose. My bad. I'm just gonna keep going for now and I'll try and fix that later, or I don't know, blend it in, whatever. So what I'm gonna do now is take this Cali shade here and I'm gonna put this right in the center of that gunmetal shade that I used. And this one feels a little bit harder pressed in the pan. So I'm gonna try and really load my brush up again with that shade. Layering those two metallics definitely added a lot more dimension to the eye look. That is so pretty. I feel like a lot of these shades are unique because a lot of times with your cool toned eyeshadow palettes, you get those really standard ashy grays or silvers. They're just kind of just a straightforward silver with a cool undertone and with silver glitters. But a lot of these shades, at least on the eye, you can see that the undertones to them or the reflect and the metallics are a little bit different. So it almost seems like a little bit more of a gold silver or a greenish toned silver. I feel like it adds a really beautiful effect to the eye, and it's not just your standard silver that you get in a lot of cool tone palettes. It's really, really pretty. So I'm just going to take that brush that I had that Bomba shade on, and I'm just going to go around that lighter shade just a little bit, just so that that lighter shade really is kind of right in the center of the eye. And then I'm going to go back in with this Gasper shade, and I'm just going to kind of go around that area just so the metallic really is kind of very concentrated in the center of the eye. Then I'm going to go in with this initial Surratt brush that I used, but I'm not going to add any more eyeshadow to it. I'm just going to kind of really lightly go over the top of the eyeshadow. And then I'm going to go in with the brush that I used the Cali shade on. Again, I'm not going to add any more product. I'm just going to really lightly graze over top of that area. Okay, so I'm going to go back in with that deepest brown, and I'm just going to really lightly, without disturbing the metallics at all, just go around that area and make sure that it's nice and deep right on my actual lid. just so that that makes the metallic shades pop even more, but I really don't want to disturb the metallic and kind of blend it out any more than I already did earlier. For the inner corner of my eye, I'm going to take this shade on the other end called Mary Jane, and this one is a lighter metallic, but it definitely has more of a yellow-green shift to it. So I'm just going to take that on a little pencil brush, and then I'm going to wet this color as well. I'm going to use this shade on my inner corner. So I definitely have some fallout on my lower lash line. I'm just going to try and kind of blend that out a little bit. I'm just going to go in with this Mari shade, the initial shade I use in my crease. And I'm just going to blend this underneath my eye quite low. And I'm just going to kind of meet it up to the outer edge of what I did on the eye, the eyelid, the upper lid. So I think just to try and test more shades in the palette, I'm going to take this Rubia shade right here. This is a mid-tone brown, and I'm going to take it on this flat shader brush from Real Techniques. It's a little bit denser. And I'm just going to use this on the outer edge of my lower lash line and then the inner corner as well, just to kind of replicate the halo shape that I'm doing on the top. And then I'm going to take that deepest brown again, and I'm going to do the exact same thing, but I'm just going to keep this right on the lash line because I'm just basically trying to kind of meet the outer edges of my upper lid just so that it looks really cohesive around. And then I'm just going to blend that out a little bit. Okay, so that darker color is definitely giving me some fallout. Again, that could just totally be user error, me not tapping my brush off or something like that, but I don't know, it's pretty significant amount of dark fallout from that matte shade, so I might have to actually remove that makeup and reapply it on my nose since it's so dark. I don't know, there's no really going back from there, but I don't know, we'll see. So I'm gonna just finish up my lower lash line and all of that and go from there. I think what I'm gonna do is, again, take a color that I haven't used yet, maybe this Sweet Lucy shade, this one right here, and I will take that on that center part of my lower lash line to brighten that area up and keep it cohesive with the top, but just to kind of show off a color that I haven't used yet. That Sweet Lucy shade is really pretty when you get it blended out onto the skin. You can really see the different colors of reflect that are in there. It's quite multi-dimensional, even in that little kind of space that I have it in. It's really pretty. So I think what I'm going to do, just to keep it a little bit more cohesive, is I'm just going to dip my brush a little bit into that Cali shade, and then I will go over that just to brighten it up a little bit. And then I will take that Real Techniques brush that I used and just really lightly blend the outer edges around that. Okay, so I finished my other eye up, and then I basically just added eyeliner and mascara. I was going to put false lashes on, but then I just don't really feel like it right now, so I'm not going to. But I will say I have some thoughts on this palette. I want to give you guys the swatches really quick first. I'm just going to do finger swatches on my arm, on bare skin. I'm not going to prime it or anything like that, just to give you an idea of how these colors translate on the skin. Obviously, that's going to be completely different on your lids with brushes. You know, all these different factors. Swatches are really just to give you an idea of how the colors look outside of the pan. So I'm going to do that really quick, and then I want to give you my thoughts on this eyeshadow palette because it's a little, you know, like that. So I'm going to start off with this shade called Cali. Okay, so there it is with one little swatch of that first shade. This, I don't know if you can see this pan. When I start to rub on it with my finger, it really creates hard pan in an extreme way. Okay, so I guess we're just gonna kind of go into my thoughts in the middle of the swatches. There's something about the way that these metallic kind of glitter shades are pressed, mixed in with their formula, that it's making them a little bit difficult to use. So I'm gonna go in again over top of that. So I was able to build up the color a little bit. It's still kind of a more sheer color. You have a lot of that sparkle, but not a ton of base color to it. And then I'll swatch a matte and show you how easily the matte goes on. and that's the matte blended out, and that's the second shade called Mari. And then this metallic right here called Beau is a different formula to this one, but the shades Mary Jane and Callie have a little bit of a difficult formula. So I'll show you the shade Beau swatched. And you see how just pigmented and gorgeous and just easily that swiped on my skin. And even in the pan where I swatched it, you can see it did not create any type of hard pan or anything like that in the eyeshadow. So here's the other matte called Rubia. Super pigmented, very, very easy, very creamy kind of feeling. This is the shade Santa Maria. Again, very, very easy. Similar formula to this Beau shade right here. Those are just more of your truer creamy metallics. Okay, this is the shade Sensimilla. Sensimilla? I don't know how you pronounce that. A matte. Oh my gosh, that was a terrible swatch. Sorry. This is the shade Bamba. Okay, I just took a little bit of Bioderma to clean up that swatch right there, but I'm going to go in with the next shade right here, which is called Sweet Lucy. And this one has a little bit more of a gritty texture to it. And it's definitely a little bit more of a, like a chunky type of a formula on that one. It swatches pretty nicely when you take the time to break it up and blend it out, but it's definitely more of a chunky formula. This is the shade Gasper. This is a matte. This one here. And then this last shade on the end is called Mary Jane. And this Mary Jane shade definitely has a similar formula to the Callie shade, because when you swatch it with your finger, you pretty immediately get hard pan on it. It might be a bit difficult to see, but hopefully on the two end shades you could see that little bit of hard pan that's created. And then this is it swatched. Okay, so there are all of the eyeshadows swatched, just really rough swatch on my arm. So first impressions, I feel like there's something about some of the formulas in this that are different from their other eyeshadow palettes that I have at least. I have the Rust palette, 27 and Gemini, but in none of those palettes did I get the issues that I felt like I was having with this palette. I was definitely getting fallout with a couple of the matte shades, which again, I never had a problem with that in the other palettes. Fallout can a lot of times be user error. It can be how you load product on your brush, whether or not, you know, you're tapping your brush off enough, what kind of brushes you're using for what you're trying to accomplish on the eye. It's a lot of different things. Regardless, I definitely feel like there was a lot more fallout going on than I'm used to with melt shadows. And that's not really an issue for me. There's a lot of eyeshadow palettes where you kind of have to use it before you do your face makeup, and darker shades that can happen a lot. If you're using a little bit of a light shade and you get fallout, you know, and you wipe it away, you don't notice it. But with any formula, any palette, if you're getting a little bit of fallout with a deeper shade, when you try and wipe it away and you get little streaks of black or something on your skin, it becomes a little bit more difficult, and you might have to kind of start from scratch in the areas where you got that fallout. So in all honesty, I'm not going to say that there's anything wrong with the mattes in here or that fallout is necessarily a huge issue in this palette. What I will definitively say I was having issue with is some of the metallics. So I'm pretty sure this Mary Jane shade and the shade Callie, these two end shades, have a similar type of a formula. And then the shades Beau, Santa Maria, and Bamba had a similar formula. And then this Sweet Lucy shade seemed to be somewhere in between the two. And with those two end shades, I feel like the problem might be that they're pressed really, really hard into the pan, whereas some of the other metallics are not pressed hard enough, and so they crumble really easily. And then these ones crumble, but because they're pressed so hard into the pan, when you try and swatch them, it just immediately creates a hard pan. And then when you swatch it onto your finger, you really barely get any of that pigment transferring onto your finger, because the oils of your finger are basically creating that hard pan, if that makes sense. And you're really not getting any of that pigment again transferring onto the skin. Obviously that's not going to matter as much if you are going to buy the palette and never like physically hand swatch it. You're basically just going to take your brush in and kind of use it that way. But a lot of times I find that eyeshadows that are pressed hard like that, when they do that with your finger swatches, they'll do that with a synthetic brush. Because the thing with synthetic bristles is that they don't have the porousness of a natural bristle, and so those super ultra soft synthetics are just gonna glide right over eyeshadows like this and create hard pan as well. So it's really not just going to be your finger that's going to do that. It's going to be your ultra soft synthetics as well, which I mean 90% of the brushes we get today are synthetics. So that's something that I definitely find to be a negative with the formula in this. It's really interesting because with the other eyeshadows, again, I haven't noticed that, but I do remember one of their older eyeshadow palettes having an issue with that. So I don't know if that's something that's happening in this eyeshadow palette as well. It's really quite disappointing. I feel like these two end shades, especially this Cali shade, is quite a difficult one to use. And all the metallics all around, as I said, are varying degrees of crumbly. Okay, so I just have this synthetic Wet n Wild brush right here. I'll show you with this shade on the end over here, this Cali shade. Immediately you can see it kind of flaking off. I wish you could see my desk. I have eyeshadow fallout all over my desk from this palette, from both the mattes and the metallic shades. I will say the eyeshadow look turned out okay, and I guess at the end of the day what really matters is how it performs on the eyes. But I don't know, I just feel like this eyeshadow palette is a little bit too difficult to work with, and I know Melt Cosmetics can do better formulas than this. Their other eyeshadow palettes, as I've stated, the Rust and the Gemini palettes, are two of my favorite eyeshadow palettes just in general, not just from their line, just in general. I love and reach for those palettes all the time, but I don't find that they have these super hard pressed kind of glittery shadows. They're just very finicky, they're messy, and they're difficult to work with. The mattes I think work nicely, and just like the other eyeshadow palettes, they're very highly pigmented and they blend nicely, but the metallics are 50% of what you come for in an eyeshadow palette like this that has an even mixture. You know, you're going to use both to create depth and brightness on the eyes, and if the metallics are finicky to work with, it really doesn't make the eyeshadow palette worth it to me. But it is what it is. Not every product that a brand launches is going to be 100% or work for everyone all of the time, and so for me personally this was a dud, but again, it doesn't mean that you wouldn't be able to use this. The eyeshadow look that I created out of it I thought was pretty. So yeah, I think that's everything I have to say about this eyeshadow palette. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you found it helpful in one way or another. If you did like it, please like and subscribe, and have an amazing day or night wherever you are. Bye!